And now it's time for RTB 101, and this is the segment where we talk about practical questions to help equip our viewers to share their faith with their friends and family more effectively. And here I am today with the man I like to call the apostle to scientists, Dr. Hugh Ross. Welcome, Hugh. And Hugh, nothing is more practical, I think, to many of our viewers than helping our kids. And we have a question today inspired by a 9-year-old boy. His mother wrote in, so we're going to read a little excerpt from her note. She says she's desperately seeking guidance for handling the question related to animal sacrifices with her very bright but emotionally struggling 9-year-old. He views animals sort of like people, and he feels that it's not fair for people to eat animals, and the thought of this just horrifies him. And he also struggles that God would have humans sacrifice animals, and he understands that Jesus is the ultimate and final sacrifice, but he just really is longing for us to all go to heaven so animals won't be hurt anymore. And I think, first of all, we just want to say an attaboy that he's asking such thought-provoking questions, and we want to affirm him in his desire to do that.
And a lot of adults ask that question too.
Yeah, and it's something that our culture is always struggling with, it seems like lately, is the question of animals and whether it's okay to eat animals and kill animals, and some sensibilities have changed in recent decades about this question, so help us think this through a little bit.
Let me take you back to the very first page of the Bible where it talks about God creating the earth and filling it with life. And it uses the word bara to create something brand new only 3 times. Once for God creating the physical universe.
So it's Genesis 1:1.
Yes.
Okay.
And then creation day 5, it talks about God creating the soulish animals.
Okay.
A reference to all those animals that can emotionally bond with us human beings and serve and please us. It would include all the birds and mammals and a few of the higher reptilian species. And last of all, it uses the word bara with respect to human beings.
Okay.
We're not only physical and soulish, we're spiritual. And just as God designed the nephesh, or the soulish animals, to bond, to relate, to serve and please us, a higher species, he designed us human beings to bond and relate and serve and please a higher being, namely God himself. The point there is there's 3 categories of life that God created. Life that's purely physical, life that's physical and soulish, and one and only one species here on earth that's physical, soulish, and spiritual. And God purposely designed the nephesh animals to strongly bond to us and us to strongly bond to them. And that bond that this 9-year-old boy feels with these animals is a picture of how God feels when he's bonded to us. And so he purposely created these animals to be able to form these incredibly powerful emotional bonds with us and us with them. But it teaches us a lesson. It was Job who said in the 12th chapter, look to these animals. They'll teach you, they'll instruct you, not only about biology, but about yourself, about God, and your relationship with God. And I'm really glad he already figured out. The sacrifice of these animals has no bearing on our atonement. Only the blood of Christ can save us. But God did have, in the Old Testament era, have us sacrifice these higher animals as a symbol of the one and only sacrifice that would atone for sin. So it has nothing to do with atonement. It's a symbol of the ultimate atonement. And here's God who saw fit to sacrifice and kill his own son, the one who created the universe. And it gives you an idea of the horror of our sin and our rebellion against God, that God had to go to that extent. And likewise, God wanted us to feel horrified by the fact that we had to sacrifice. I think what I would say to the parents of this child, it's a wonderful opportunity to communicate the gospel and the depth of what Christ did in our behalf.
So the attachment that this boy feels with animals, that's a very biblical idea. God created us to have attachments with some of the animals.
But he also wanted us to realize how strongly he attaches to us.
I see.
And how we are designed to attach just as strongly to him, but sin gets in the way.
So is there any sort of hierarchy in Scripture of like lower animals and then these nephesh animals and then humans, and that we are allowed to kill lower animals for purposes that we need? Does the Bible have anything to say about that, about our use of the animals?
It does, and you'll find that in Psalms and Proverbs and the book of Job, basically making the point we're to put a much higher value on these nephesh animals than we do the animals and plants that are purely physical, and the highest value of all on human beings. And it tells us that we're allowed to eat these animals, but we're to treat them with kindness. And so we're not to abuse these animals. They're to be raised in a particular way. And so that's why I'm an advocate of, ethical treatment of these animals that we intend to use for wool, for clothing, and also for food.
So you don't see it as being unscriptural or unbiblical to use animals as food. That would not be cruel per se, as long as we're treating them ethically in their lives, but then we're allowed to use them as food. That's an okay idea.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, to give you an example, it's okay to harvest eggs from chickens, but we should allow the chickens to have an enjoyable life. Let them run free. Let them enjoy life, but yeah, we can use them for meat, we can use them for eggs, likewise the milk of animals. In fact, my uncle in Nova Scotia, he would raise beef cattle, but he made a pet of every one of these animals he intended to use for meat, and he was convinced that kind treatment and that bonding, that emotional bond he had with his beef cattle, made for much higher quality meat.
But only humans alone, that when their life is taken, that is it's a higher price or a kind of a higher worth than when an animal's life is taken.
That's the abuse we're seeing today, where you got certain people saying we should put these nephesh animals at the same level of value as human beings. That is not biblical. The Bible tells us we're to put a much higher value on a human life than we are any of these birds and mammal species.
Very good. Well, Dr. Hugh Ross, everyone, I hope that helps you think about that question a little bit more deeply.